morning and welcome back to Baptist for Liberty. I'm your host, Joanna Works. Today is Thursday, July 3rd. Yesterday was, of course, Wednesday the 2nd, and we covered our book club. And we didn't get to finish the chapter that we were on, so since I don't have anything else scheduled for today, and that's what we're going to be doing today. So we're on chapter 3. And we're reading about this great plan of secret societies. Our book is The New World Order, the Ancient Plan of Secret Societies. So yesterday we were reading through different secret societies, ideas of the New World, America being perfect breeding ground for their plans of a new Atlantis. And in their thinking Atlantis was a good thing and the destruction of it was terrible, and they want to bring it about again. And our author and myself pointed out that this really correlates excuse me, with the Bible story of the flood. The Atlantis world was probably the pre-flood world, and that in the days at the end times, it's going to be like the days of Noah. And we do know that people are gearing towards a one world government. And the Bible tells us that there's going to be a one world government in the end time. We left off, it went back into Greek mythology a little bit, talking about Lucifer and the flame being a representative of wisdom. The light. In Central and South America, a land of dark-skinned natives, Quetzalcoatl was said to be a white man with a strong body, broad forehead, large eyes, and a flowing beard. He wore a mitre on his head similar to the headdress worn by the Egyptian goddess Isis in ancient Egyptian drawings. Quetzalcoatl dressed in long white robes reaching to his feet, which were covered with a design of red crosses. This brings to mind the garb of the British Crusaders, which he has in quotation marks here. And as we now know, the rosy cross symbol is the one employed by another modern-day secret society, the Rosicrucians. Quetzalcoatl left the Americas and entrusted his teachings and the purpose of his mission to a secret order of priests, until the day when he returned to rule again. This is why, when Spanish explorers first set foot in Central America, they were greeted as returning gods because native legend had predicted the return of the white-faced Quetzalcoatl. Sir Francis Bacon. If one man can be singled out as the person most responsible for the colonization of America, the honor would certainly fall to the head of both Masonry and Rosicrucianism of his era, Sir Francis Bacon. In the early 1600s, Bacon authored a novel entitled New Atlantis, which laid out the idea for a utopian society across the ocean from Europe where mankind could build a new civilization based upon the principles he believed to be those of the legendary last continent of Atlantis, cherishing as he did the dream of a great commonwealth in the new Atlantis. And this is in quotation marks. Marie Bauer Hall claims in collections of emblems, ancient and modern, that truly the sixth great empire of the Western world had its inception with the advent of Sir Francis Bacon, the true father of democracy, the actual and true founder of America, wise guardian and protector of its history during the last 300 years. And it goes on a little bit here. There's rumors that Sir Bacon was actually the illegitimate child of Queen Elizabeth and Lord Robert Dudley. However, he was raised as if he was the child of Lady Anne Cook Bacon, the wife of Lord High Chancellor of England, who was a lady-in-waiting for Queen Elizabeth. There's a little error here in this book. It says that if this remains true, then Sir Francis Bacon would be the grandson of King Henry VII, but Queen Elizabeth's father was Henry VIII. This is probably just a typo because, the kings and queens numbers are given in Roman numerals, so it's probably just missing the I, the third I on that numeral there. So we're just going to skip down a little bit towards the bottom of this page, and it's page 47. Though born a half-century after the death of Columbus, the ciphers Columbus used were later to be called Baconian ciphers. This secret method of communication involved the seemingly random use of italics and the use of subtly different styles to convey coded messages. Sometimes even single letters within words were italicized or had subtle font changes. Entire volumes have been devoted to the deciphering of these coded messages, many of which are available only in the rare book section of the Library of Congress. There is evidence suggesting that Columbus was a member of the same secret society that Bacon led in his later days. The similarities between the two are so remarkable that Lord Bacon has even been referred to as Little Columbus of literature. It goes on to say he was a very secretive person. Although he strove mightily to propagate the New Atlantis idea like many others involved in the plan since, he preferred to remain in the background as much as possible. It shows little things on a pamphlet for a play by William Shakespeare, and also a dedication to the reader by William Raleigh, who wrote the foreword of Sir Francis' book, and he was responsible for having the book published after Francis Bacon passed away. And if you look at this image of this page, you can see the font changes, the italics and the styles, and it does look very coded because it's not consistent. Just letters here and there, or words, whole words in italics, or a different font. Bacon's novel New Atlantis was published the year after his death in 1627 by his trusted secretary William Raleigh. Hall describes some of the hidden Masonic meanings contained in the New Atlantis. And remember, Hall is meaning Manly Hall, who was a, I believe they said 32nd degree Mason, and he's used a lot of Hall's books and writings to demonstrate the mythology and belief system within Masonic lodges. This quote says, "On the title page is a curious design. It shows the figure of an ancient creature representing time, drawing a female figure from a dark cavern. The meaning is obvious. Through time, the hidden truth shall be revealed. This figure is one of the most famous of the seals or symbols of the Order of the Quest. Contained within it is the whole promise of the resurrection of man and the restitution of the divine theology." I want to comment on this resurrection of man and restitution. Well, of course, Satan likes to take the truth and twist it. Man is fallen, and we're dead in our trespasses and sins. But the resurrection that we should look forward to, well, Christ has already been died for our sins, buried, and rose again. So that resurrection, that first resurrection, has already taken place. As individuals, when you repent of your sins and you're born again, born in the Spirit, that's a new birth. Now, we do look forward to that day of resurrection. Oftentimes, in our modern theological terms, it's referred to as the rapture. And rapture is, I believe, an Old English word that means great joy. And the reason why we refer to that resurrection as a rapture is because of the joy we have to be united in both body and spirit with our Lord. Because, those believers who haven't died yet, they're going to be changed in the twinkling of an eye, but those who have already died, Thessalonians points out, they're not going to miss that day, the coming of the Lord. They're going to be brought out of the grave, and they're also going to be changed physically because they're going to have a new body, and that is the scriptural resurrection. And it's not going to be brought about by any means of man. It's not going to be connected with the New World Order or the one world government that so many people are seeking to deliberately create. There will be a millennial kingdom where Jesus Christ will be ruling and reigning, saints with him over the nations of the world before the final rebellion, and then the new heavens and earth. But between the resurrection of the saints and the millennial kingdom, it's going to be 7 years of, we call it tribulation, and that's in the Bible, that's a biblical term. I know some people like to criticize the idea of the resurrection, the rapture, because the word rapture isn't in the scriptures, and certainly not used in that way. But I think the word came about in theology studies later, but it's because that word references the joy we're going to have in that day. It is a reference to biblical truth. And we are told that we're going to be rejoicing in that day. Those left behind, there's going to be great wailing and gnashing of teeth and tribulation. And that's, I don't know, beyond imagination, I guess, of how bad that's going to be, although we know Hollywood loves to make all kinds of movies on that. In fact, not that long ago, I saw a DVD on, I didn't watch the DVD, I just saw it on the shelf at the library, and it was called Armageddon 2, so apparently there was 2 movies, and it was supposed to be about, like a dramatization of the Battle of Armageddon and the armies of the nations and trying to stop this big catastrophe. I could tell already just from looking at the description on the back that it wasn't going to be very biblical based, but I might watch it and review it out of curiosity, because as I said before, Hollywood does shape the way people think about things, and I don't know, sometimes I think just watching those things, it's interesting to me because it's like, oh, this is what those people meant when they were talking like this. It kind of gives you an idea of what people's concepts are, not just because it's shaped by Hollywood, but then Hollywood is also shaped by the ideas of other people, so it's like a cycle. Feeds on itself in some ways, because excuse me, you have people imitating real life in their art, or they're imitating their perspective, what they think life is or ought to be in movies. And you have movies that deliberately used to shape and move the masses' mind towards an idea. So anyway, I think that ties right back into what we were talking about in this book, because Francis Bacon had written a book. What's the point of this book? It's to give people this idea to the masses, and yet as this book that I'm reading mentions in following paragraphs is that many Masons believe that the book was heavily edited, that the reason it wasn't published during his lifetime is because it told too much. And so Raleigh, being Bacon's secretary but also being a loyal Mason, was charged with editing it so that it only contained enough to plant the seed in people's minds that they wanted planted, but didn't actually give away that there are people actually moving to make these things happen. Anyway, moving on, I'm going to skip on to the next heading, which reads The New Atlantis. British exploration in America began in 1585 when Sir Walter Raleigh, but it's a different spelling, so I don't know if they're actually pronounced the same way, Raleigh, an adventuring British nobleman, mounted an expedition to colonize Roanoke Island off the coast of what is now North Carolina. The 24-year-old was already a member of a secret society which would later become known as the Baconian Circle. This circle, of course, believed that America was to be the glittering New Atlantis promised for centuries by secret societies. So great was the clamor for the settlement of America which the Baconian Circle had set up in England that Raleigh had no trouble recruiting candidates for a new expedition, as every man in Europe had it on good authority that the Indians used chamber pots of solid gold encrusted with rubies and diamonds. Once they arrived, however, the new colonialists found no gold like that which the Spanish had discovered in Central and South America. Under constant attack by hostile Indians, they were eventually wiped out. After the failure of Sir Walter Raleigh's expedition in 1585, it took a generation before the British were ready to mount another attempt to colonize America. This time, the only way to stir interest in the new colonizing effort was to portray the expedition as a great work for God, through which the souls of countless Indian savages could be saved. The Virginia Company was duly formed, with Francis Bacon as one of its early members. In the preamble to the company's charter, King James I, who was also busy authorizing his own English translation of the Bible, justified the new expedition by stating that it had been organized for the propagating of Christian religion to such people as yet live in darkness and miserable ignorance of the true knowledge and worship of God, and may in time bring the infidels and savages living in these parts to human civility and to a settled and quiet government. It is interesting to note, however, that of the first party of 144 men, only one minister, Rev. Robert Hunt, was included. The colonists landed in Jamestown on May 14, 1607. Fully half the party were English gentlemen in search of easy riches, who were totally unable to cope with the unbroken wilderness. Unfortunately, their code of conduct forbade them from doing any physical labor. Among the early arrivals were jewelers and perfumer. The Reverend Hunt tried in vain to rally the gentlemen to help with the necessary tasks of the colony and put their faith in God instead of gold. But no crops were planted that summer. In fact, it would be 20 years before the colony would plant a crop large enough to sustain itself. When food rations ran out and the gentlemen grew hungry, they went to the Indians and traded for food. Were it not for the unusual tolerance of the mighty Indian chief, Powhatan, the little colony would surely have starved in the first few years. As it was, in less than 2 years, only 38 of the initial 144 men remained alive in Jamestown. Meanwhile, back home in England, the leaders of the secret societies were in an uproar. They tried to suppress letters and other accounts of what was really happening to the beleaguered Virginia colony, but the truth could not be squashed. As a result, fundraising for a rescue mission to resupply Jamestown was very difficult. When finally launched in 1609, the 9-ship fleet managed to sail into a hurricane and its flagship ran aground on the island of Bermuda. Shakespeare's play, The Tempest, which made its debut in 1611, was said to have been inspired by this incident. The theme of the famous drama was that there was a magical isle across the sea where nature brought forth such an abundance that no man would have to work, and the concept of personal property would be dissolved. In the play, the idealistic yet honest old counselor Gonzalo muses that if he had a plantation on that luxuriant island, he would design it along communal lines and nature would supply the rest. And it quotes part of that, and I'm just going to skip it. But here is something that I thought was kind of interesting, which is one of the reasons why I mentioned this Bacon fellow. Over the centuries, hundreds of books have been written asserting that the plays attributed to William Shakespeare were in reality written by Lord Francis Bacon. The Library of Congress has an entire card catalog drawer full of hundreds of entries on the subject in its rare books section. If Bacon did write the Shakespeare material and was able to keep it a secret for 4 centuries, then his importance to those who were privy to the secret in today's world would be greatly enhanced. There is no doubt that someone named William Shakespeare did exist. There is no doubt, however, that he was a commoner, and little doubt that he was illiterate. Yet the plays attributed to him show a vast knowledge of English court etiquette, numerous foreign languages, and a masterful command of the English language. Critics of the Bacon-Shakespeare connection have trouble explaining away these discrepancies. Masonic researcher Marie Buer-Hall maintains Sir Francis Bacon is the only man of his period who could have written the plays. William Shakespeare, this Stratford man, most definitely could not have written them, because it has been proved time and again beyond the shadow of a doubt that William Shakespeare could not read or write. Okay, I'm not so sure about how well it was proven beyond a shadow of doubt. They say that Shakespeare had a command of the English language, but Shakespeare made up so many words. And, I mean, okay, I'm not saying that there's no way Shakespeare wrote the plays. I'm just saying that Shakespeare, in his plays, he made up words that have become part of the English language. He made up phrases, and this could have been the imagination, the brilliance of an uneducated person, still being able to put words together to, okay, he doesn't know the proper words, so make up a new one, you know? I think that was just, this is just my opinion, you know? But I suppose, on the other hand, if someone such as Sir Bacon or somebody else had used Shakespeare using his identity to publish their works, the made-up words, I guess, goes to, it would make sense that that would belong to somebody who wrote in codes, who used ciphers a lot. That kind of imagination, I guess, would be very useful in made-up languages, or maybe the words are actually borrowed from older Masonic materials. I don't know. Either way, I guess that could be interesting. I guess I want to defend the whole concept that William Shakespeare wrote the books is because he was a commoner. It's because he was uneducated that it makes it, I don't know, a more interesting part of history if it was true. But that could just be my wishful thinking. So, anyway, moving on. In fact, the only evidence that William Shakespeare was literate at all consists of 5 alleged signatures appearing in his will. Why perpetrate such an elaborate hoax? Since many of the plays depicted real scandals in the British court involving Bacon's own estranged family, his authorship would have to be concealed. Also, I'd have to say alleged estranged family. And another thing that this writer, I don't remember him ever bringing up, but under Queen Elizabeth, censorship was huge. This is something, a lot of people think of Queen Elizabeth as being this very wonderful, benevolent queen. A lot of people, if they don't buy into the her having children out of wedlock, secretly, and giving them to her handmaidens to claim and raise, and then they say, she was the Virgin Queen. I don't think she was necessarily. I really actually doubt that she was the Virgin Queen, but even though I don't really have any proof or evidence that she is the mother of the Sir Bacon necessarily. But, oftentimes history depicts exaggerations either of virtue or of villainy on our historical figures and times and events. Queen Elizabeth was not necessarily a virtuous and grand ruler. She had her problems and issues too. I think what makes her remembered, though, as being such a grand and virtuous queen was, one, she was able to maintain power when so many of those before her, there was such turmoil, but the fact that she was able to maintain power says something, not necessarily of her virtue, but of the force that she had and was willing to use to maintain her authority once she got it. Also, the use of censorship, and victors write history. Well, she won that battle for the crown and was able to maintain the crown, so that made her the victor and gave her the ability to write history. So I left off about his estranged family. For example, according to both Marie Bower Hall and Baconian scholar Elizabeth Well Gallup, Bacon had a younger brother, Robert Devereux, the second child of the union between Lord Dudley and Earl of Leicester and Queen Elizabeth. Devereux was also sent for adoption by the star-crossed couple. However, he himself later had an affair with Elizabeth, his mother, and the two may have conspired to kill Dudley. When Bacon learned the facts of his birth at about age 16, he confronted the Queen with them. In a fit of anger, she admitted her motherhood, but immediately sent Bacon to France and took action permanently barred him from the throne. In an incredible irony, Devereux was later accused of treason for trying to raise the city of London in revolt against the Queen, his mother. For this, he was tried and executed in 1601. During the trial, it fell upon Lord Bacon to serve as the Queen's attorney, prosecuting and condemning his own brother Robert to death. Assuming all this is fact, Shakespeare's Hamlet takes on a stunning realism if considered as an attempt by Lord Bacon to recount a tragic story of his own family. Alright, and I also have to stop here because I saw a movie. It was called Anonymous, and it was supposedly on the truth about Shakespeare and who was the writer behind Shakespeare. And I watched the movie and I intended to fact check it, and I just didn't get around to it. So when I was reading this book, I was like, oh, okay, that's interesting. But it would appear that that movie tried to blend both of these men into one character, both Bacon and his brother Devereux. How accurate this is, there's no sources or reference mentioned other than these two ladies who are scholars. It doesn't say what their sources are. I suppose that there was a trial for uprising on Devereux. That would be a matter of historical record. Him having an affair with his mother, him plotting against Dudley with her, the other bits, that, I don't know. if there's any real historical evidence for that, or just rumors or something. At some point, the historic William Shakespeare did come into a substantial sum of money. According to Marie Bower Hall, in 1602 he returned to Stratford a wealthy man and purchased 107 acres of land. He also helped his father in the purchase of a coat of arms under false pretenses. Now this would be historical record. Shakespeare died in 1616 at age 52, supposedly after a drinking bout with Ben Jonson, the famed English playwright and poet. Jonson was a close friend and contemporary of Lord Bacon, though 11 years his junior. Jonson was asked to terminate the deception by retiring the historical William Shakespeare prematurely. Hall stated that Jonson admitted he put arsenic in the nitwit's beer. Jonson wrote of Bacon fondly, however. Of greatness he could not want, but of the death of Shakespeare, supposedly the greatest playwright of all time, Jonson and all his colleagues, who should have known him well, would write nothing. Shakespeare's death was ignored by all contemporary authors, though his plays were glorified. At his death there was not a book or a desk in his possession. There is no mention of any manuscript in his will. The first folio was printed 7 years after his death. At the time, no relations or heirs made any claims. 17 plays were not published until after his death, yet no provisions are made in his will for these plays. Though miserly, he never sought remuneration for his plays. Why is Bacon's connection to Shakespeare so important? If true, then neither Lord Bacon's genius nor his influence on present-day secret societies can be underestimated. Imagine, if you will, a man so clever that he could not only author the greatest body of literature produced, but keep his authorship a secret for centuries. It is no surprise, then, that secret societies of today were so respectful of his plan for a new Atlantis. Manly Hall claims that a Baconian secret society was set up in America while Jamestown was still floundering. Membership soon spread into South America in the person of legendary revolutionary Simon Bolivar. Hall stated that the Bacon Group was also very powerful in Germany, France, and the Netherlands. Although secret societies played a significant role in the British colonization of America, with colonization came a force that was to bedevil their well-laid plans for the New World Order. Christians. Unlike the greedy dandies of Jamestown, they came with a spirit of self-sacrifice and consequently flourished. Today, as then, it is Christians who are the major stumbling block to the planned rise of their New World Order. Through the years, this concept has remained the same: to unite all nations under a single sovereign world government. Okay, and that's it for this chapter. Alright, and with that, we're going to close with our Proverbs for the day. We're on Proverbs chapter 3. My son, forget not my law, but let thine heart keep my commandments. For length of days and long life and peace shall they add to thee. Let not mercy and truth forsake thee. Bind them about thy neck, write them upon the table of thine heart. So shalt thou find favor and good understanding in the sight of God and man. Trust in the Lord with all thine heart, and lean not unto thine own understanding. In all thy ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct thy paths. Be not wise in thine own eyes. Fear the Lord, and depart from evil. It shall be health to thy navel, and marrow to thy bones. Honor the Lord with thy substance, and with the firstfruits of all thine increase. So shall thy barns be filled with plenty, and thy presses shall burst out with new wine. My son, despise not the chastening of the Lord, neither be weary of his correction. For whom the Lord loveth he correcteth, even as a father the son in whom he delighteth. Happy is the man that findeth wisdom, and the man that getteth understanding. For the merchandise of it is better than the merchandise of silver, and the gain thereof than fine gold. She is more precious than rubies, and all the things thou canst desire are not to be compared unto her. Length of days is in her right hand, and in her left hand riches and honor. Her ways are ways of pleasantness, and all her paths are peace. She is a tree of life to them that lay a hold upon her, and happy is every one that retaineth her. The Lord by wisdom hath bounded the earth, by understanding hath he established the heavens. By his knowledge the depths are broken up, and the clouds drop down the dew. My son, let not them depart from thine eyes. Keep sound wisdom and discretion. So shall they be life unto thy soul, and grace to thy neck. Then shalt thou walk in thy way safely, and thy foot shall not stumble. When thou liest down, thou shalt not be afraid. Yea, thou shalt lie down, and thy sleep shall be sweet. Be not afraid of sudden fear, neither of the desolation of the wicked when it cometh. For the Lord shall be thy confidence, and shall keep thy foot from being taken. Withhold not good from them to whom it is due, when it is in the power of thine hand to do it. Say not unto thy neighbor, Go, and come again, and tomorrow I will give when thou hast it by thee. Devise not evil against thy neighbor, seeing he dwelleth securely by thee. Strive not with a man without cause, if he have done thee no harm. Envy thou not the oppressor, and choose none of his ways. For the froward is abomination to the Lord, but his secret is with the righteous. The curse of the Lord is in the house of the wicked, but he blesseth the habitation of the just. Surely he scorneth the scorners, but he giveth grace unto the lowly. The wise shall inherit glory, but shame shall be the promotion of fools.